just published the 12th annual Tech Trends Report. You'll want a copy in your library. I'm Tonya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Amy Webb, professor at the NYU Stern School of Business and founder of the Future Today Institute. Welcome, Amy.
Hey, Tonya.
I should actually say welcome back. You've been a repeat guest on the show. You've got a new report that just came out. But for those of us who there's some people who haven't heard of you or maybe haven't followed your work, give us a brief description of your resume and a summary of your professional resume.
Sure. So I'm a quantitative futurist. My job is to use data to find weak signals, to track and discover emerging trends in technology and science, and to model out risk and opportunity scenarios. And this is something that I've been doing for the past 15 years, and I work with lots of companies all over the world. My team advises parts of the government, and I teach it to MBA students at NYU.
As I mentioned, the Future Today Institute just released its 12th annual Tech Trends Report, this one looking ahead into 2019. Amy, this is your biggest report yet. It's huge. In fact, it summarizes the research behind it. Tell us about the research behind it and how you organized all of this information.
Sure. So I'm going to show it to you. This is not in its fully bound form yet because we're talking before the date that it officially comes out, but this is it. This report, as I mentioned to a friend of mine, weighs more than the Toshiba Satellite Pro that I had when I was in high school. This thing is massive, but it's beautiful. So this is our 12th annual. Let me put that down. This is our 12th annual edition of the report. There are 315 tech trends this year across 26 different industry sectors, and that's a 30% increase from last year. My team, I thought, was going to kill me at some point because that's a lot of it's a lot. There's a lot in this report, but there are some concrete reasons why the report grew and is so much bigger this year. Some of that has to do with convergence that we are starting to see across lots of different technologies, and when there are points of convergence, that oftentimes leads to a bunch of new trends sort of flourishing. And so in part because of a lot of big developments we've seen in artificial intelligence, we've started to see some concrete changes in genomics and CRISPR, and in the home automation space, there have been a ton of really interesting new advancements. As a result of these things and how they relate to other trend areas, we wound up with, close to almost 100 new trends that we're tracking. I should say that, and we go into an explanation at the beginning of the report, our trends are not trendy. So they have to meet different criteria, and oftentimes trends evolve as they emerge. So some of what's in the report we've been tracking for 12 years, and then some of what's there is brand new.
There was so much that you covered. It's really difficult to focus in on just portions of that. But I would say one of the things I want to talk about, two of your key takeaways deal with this ongoing issue of privacy and personal information sharing. So tell us about those two.
Sure. I think, one of the key pieces of information that kept popping up over and over again throughout many different trend categories was privacy and data governance, and who actually owns our data, who has the right to our data, and not just us as individuals, but our company data, our country's data. This came up a lot, and as a result of that, one big observation that our analysis has revealed is that privacy is officially dead. You should have no assumption that your data is private. And partially that is because there's no central authority right now. We don't have a Department of Data in the United States. Most countries, in fact, don't have that. So there's not alignment around who should have access to what. And that's happening at a time where we're seeing a literal explosion in various different technologies that use and rely on our data, like genetic tests. A lot of us are getting our genome sequenced for any variety of reasons, but there's not a lot of clear explanation right now around who owns your DNA. You know, it's possible that you don't own the rights to your own DNA once somebody else has analyzed it. And that leads to some really interesting but thorny philosophical questions, like who owns the rights to you? We don't have an answer to that right now. But there are lots of other areas. So from smart speakers to smart cameras to Walmart and some other big box retailers launching sensors inside of their grocery carts and tracking your behavioral biometrics as you move around the store. So this was a really big area that we were looking at this year, and all signs point to privacy being gone officially. Now, what that means in practice is that we are probably moving into something like a personal data record, where right now there's a lot of question around who owns which pieces of our data, but increasingly we're starting to see convergence there too. So it's very likely that Google, Amazon, Apple, IBM, Facebook, will own some or parts of your personal data in something that starts looking like a single record. And what we'll have to start thinking about going forward is who owns that big personal data record, and whether or not it's heritable. So, can I pass that on to my children so that they have a big picture of who I am, and they have my medical data that informs them, later on. They have my grades. They have all the stuff that is me that currently the companies in my life have access to. So these are pretty big seismic shifts in what we're seeing in the tech landscape.
And it requires a lot of thought, which I don't think we've done up until this point. Another one of the pair of takeaways that you have, and in fact, not surprisingly, involved China. What do we need to know about China's ascension and in AI and other tech markets?
So this is another really interesting, for me, it was sort of revelatory. So, we every year when we sit down, my team and I sit down to write this report, we're doing research all the time. But we tend to reference previous reports just because it's nice to sort of gauge where we are and where we've been going. This is the first year that China is not its own thing. And rather than China being a sort of single trend or a single pull-out section, China is pervasive throughout the entire report. So you will be hard-pressed to go through any of the big, broad tech categories that we cover, whether that's climate science and tech, or transportation and automation, or wearables. You're gonna have a hard time not finding China all throughout the report. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, the government has put a significant part of its sovereign wealth fund to the development of some core technologies. Among them are artificial intelligence and genomic editing. There's been some consolidation of power in the Chinese government in advance of some other adjacently related initiatives. One of them is called the Belton Road Initiative. This is an infrastructure strategy on the surface, but it's also about building 5G and laying fiber and helping lots of different countries that are in vulnerable circumstances, either geopolitically or economically, plug in. So there are some really interesting accelerants as a result. And China, I think, sees an opportunity to become a true global leader in politics and economics, but also in things like AI. I mean, they've made no secret that they want to become the global hegemon in artificial intelligence. And if you look at some of what's happening in robotics that they're working on, autonomous transport, a lot of different areas, I think if you are somebody who cares at all about the future and also pay attention to science and tech, you're going to have to start paying very, very close attention to China.
One trend you identify at the highest priority is that of VSO becoming the next SEO. Explain that.
Sure. So just as, now that everybody finally feels comfortable with search engine optimization, which continues to change all the time, there's something new to worry about, and that is voice search optimization. So our models for the past several years that look at smart speakers and, more importantly, voice interfaces continue to show that, with sometime between now and probably 2021, about half of the interactions we have with machines will be using our voices. And if you look at data from the past holiday shopping season, which was remarkable, it is staggering the number of Americans who received a smart Bluetooth speaker for the holidays is staggering. 1 out of 10 Americans, according to some research that was done by NPR, 1 in 10 Americans gave or received a Bluetooth speaker, a smart speaker. So the growth rate, I think, is a little faster than everybody anticipated. For at least Google and definitely for Amazon, those smart speakers are loss leaders. So they're selling them for far less than they would need to sell them to make a true profit. So with all this being said, people are having conversations with these devices, and not just their smart speakers, but their cell phones that have voice capabilities, their smart mirrors. I'm pointing to one as though there's one right here. It's not. There is, but smart mirrors, right? There are all kinds of smart devices. Our cars that now use voice, and as a result of that, there is going to be a need fairly soon, I would argue now, for voice search optimization, which is a way of saying, how do you make sure that your content is the one that gets to consumers first? This is a nut that a lot of people are currently working furiously to crack. So this is going to be a big field going forward.
All right. Will the promise of 5G begin to bear fruit in 2019, Amy?
5G, everybody's favorite subject area. My short answer is it depends on how you define 5G. So there's a couple of things happening. One, on the sort of hardware technology front, the networks are not yet configured, the small cells are not yet deployed. There's a lot of work still to be done in a lot of countries around the world, certainly here in the United States. Again, we have not seen strong leadership from the federal government on this key area. So, and we've been, quite frankly, dragging our feet a little bit. The wireless carriers have suddenly reached fever pitch in their marketing efforts around 5G. And we are starting to see the first very few phones that are capable of very early 5G connections. But with all this being said, there is no true 5G in the United States, at least not, and I would also say that 5G is sort of it's a big umbrella term that means a lot of different things and encompasses a lot of different technologies. That being said, it is much more likely that we will see private 5G networks deployed in the US before we see the rollout of big, huge public 5G networks in our cities. And the reason for that is that 5G helps reduce things like latency. It can be configured so that you can have certain parts of a network function just fine. And if there's a problem with a different part of a network, it doesn't have to shut everything down. You can take a single thing that's connected to it offline. And for that reason, I think we're much more likely to see 5G deployed privately inside of to service the industrial Internet of Things. So this would be warehouses, automated warehouses, automated manufacturing plants. And for that, I think all eyes should be on Amazon, and places like that where we're likely to see private 5G networks deployed first.
What advice would you offer the CEO trying to lead an enterprise or parent trying to raise a family on how to be resilient in the face of all these changes?
So that's a terrific question. And I think it goes to the heart of a paradox. And that paradox is, why on earth would we publish a static report once a year? That kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, right? If everything is in flux. You know, we all have to get very comfortable with uncertainty and be much more willing to be flexible and to adapt. And I think we are better at making decisions, whether we're parents or we are the CEOs of enormous companies, if we are armed with information in advance and we have the luxury of time to sort out what implications there may be depending on the decision that we make. So the reason that we put out this enormous report, knowing that everything is in flux, is because first of all, the trends that we cover are not trendy, so they tend to be a little more slow moving. But we intentionally include all of these different areas because most people tend to focus way too narrowly when they are thinking about the future. And to be honest, most people aren't thinking about the future. They fetishize the future, but they are very much thinking about right now. So the report is free, it's freely available, and it's actually available under a Creative Commons license, a share-alike license, which basically means you can take it, you can remix it, you can build on it, you can take it apart, just give us credit at some point. And that is because my great hope is that not only if you have information in advance and you're able to make connections between different industries and you force yourself to look for outliers outside of the areas that you normally pay attention to, that is equivalent to seeing around corners. Like there's no big secret to foresight. Futurists do not make predictions. All we do is make connections. And if that's the case, anybody can make connections. And if you're somebody who can make connections using much more information than you would normally use, and you are flexible in your thinking, and you are willing to adapt, then you're going to be resilient regardless of what change comes. You're going to be prepared.
Absolutely. Amy Webb, what great insight. And thank you so much for such a detailed report. If somebody wants to connect with you, how can they go about doing that?
Sure. Well, the report is available now for free. They can go to our website, futuretodayinstitute.com. You'll see it on the front page. You can download it there. And as well as a bunch of other resources, because all of our frameworks are made available for free. And you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Amy Webb.
Thanks again, Amy. That was Amy Webb, professor at the NYU Stern School of Business, and she's the founder of the Future Today Institute. And if you guys want to find me, you can find more of my interviews right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or go to my website, tonyahall.net. I've got links to all my social sites. Thanks for watching.